Hi folks, I am just going to run through some quick exercises with you to show you what I'm looking for your demonstration of principles. I'm going to do Unity first, and then I'll take a break, and then the next video I will show you the emphasis or focal point. So I'm going to keep my exercises very, very simple just to show you what I want you to do for your exercises, but I do want you to spend enough time so that you can show that you really do understand the design principles. The first thing I'm going to do, and this is what I would encourage you all to do, is have your assignment sheet out and your sketchbook ready so that you're not missing any of the instructions that are in the assignment sheet. So if I'm looking at part 1, Unity, which is what I'm working on, it is to create 3 different compositions in your sketchbook in pencil, portraying unity through proximity, unity through repetition, and unity through continuation. So then I'm going to go to my assignment sheet that gives the description of the 3 types of unity and the guidance for how to create these sketches in your sketchbook. So the first is unity by proximity. To achieve this desired approach, place a variety of shapes closely together to create a visual relationship. Objects, shapes, or forms in compositions that are placed in close relationship to one another create a visual sense of unity. That sense of unity is really creating a congruous or harmonious or a fully integrated composition that looks as though all of the elements in the composition belong together. Okay, and again, the intention is to create visual cohesion. The second is to create a composition with unity by repetition, and that is using several similar shapes repeated throughout the design to create visual unity. So that repetition of shape and form, you can use color, but for this exercise, we're sticking to graphite. That repetition creates a visual relationship. It relates each object to the next and creates that visual sense of cohesion and harmony because of the repeated pattern that you're creating. And the third example of unity we're going to do is continuation or flow. And again, we're going to use different shapes, so several different shapes in a variety of sizes in an arrangement that creates a visual flow. So that flow or continuation is implied by a composition that causes the viewer's eye to follow shapes or forms or objects along an implied path. So really, you're creating a visual direction through that sense of placement of objects and forms, and that creates a visual unity or a visual integrated image. So I'm going to choose to put all of my 3 examples of unity on one page. However you want to do it is up to you. You could do full page sketches, 1 per each page, or you could do what I'm doing and kind of break it out into 3 different sections. And I'm just going to keep it very loose and simple. This isn't a formal piece, it's just a sketchbook piece. So I'm going to do a guideline at the top, a guideline at the bottom, and then I'm going to break it into 3 sections. So those are going to be my working areas. And I'm going to have proximity, repetition, and continuation. And again, I'm going to be going real simple here just to give you a basic idea. You can go a little bit more complex. You can make it way more detailed if you'd like to, but I'm going to keep it simple. So I'm going to start with proximity. Again, we are placing a variety of shapes closely together to create a visual relationship. Objects, shapes, or form. And we want a variety of shapes. So I'm going to do basic shapes. I'm going to do the triangle, the square, and the circle. And so if I look at this plane as my composition, the placement of where I put those shapes on this composition is going to determine its proximity. And I'm going to cluster them in the top right corner, or if you've broken into fours, the top right quadrant. And I'm gonna do a triangle shape, a circle, a square, a rectangle, and I'm just gonna repeat those shapes. And there you have unity by proximity. So a grouping of shapes together in one section, the eye is drawn to that area of space. All of this space around it is negative space. So the eye sees this empty space and is automatically drawn to the section and cluster of positive objects in that composition. And so this is proximal arrangement of different shapes and forms, creating a unity. Okay, so next we're gonna go to repetition. I'm gonna check back to my assignment to make sure that I'm doing it correctly. So for repetition, several similar shapes repeated throughout the design. And the repeated shapes or objects or forms create a visual relationship. So several similar shapes, right? With proximity, we did variety of shapes. So we're gonna keep similar shapes repeated throughout the design. And repetition is that shape repeated. And so for this, I might think about using that grid, right? We talked about the grid that helps create that visual patterning. And so I might lay down a really light grid that's very subtle. And I'm not measuring here because it's a sketch. And I might, again, do my vertical lines to the grid and just lay this down. And now I have that guidance. And now I'm gonna repeat similar shapes throughout the composition. And that's going to create a sense of repetition. So I think I'm going to go with triangle shapes. And I'm just going to place that triangle using my grid as my guide. And then I'll carry it down. You'll notice unity through repetition in textiles, in wallpapers, in lots of different wrapping paper, and anything that is really requiring a visual design. And you can vary this if you'd like and start making that similar shape a little bit bigger and do kind of a gradation of scale just to make it a little bit more interesting for yourself. And again, you can choose to make this more complicated. I am just making it very simple to give you an idea of how to complete this assignment. So that is repetition of shape and form. Okay, so next we're gonna do unity by continuation or flow. That is our last exercise for unity. And for this, we're gonna place several shapes in a variety of sizes in an arrangement that creates a visual flow. So several different shapes. Again, we're going back to kind of what we did with proximity, several different shapes in an arrangement that creates a visual flow. And we're using a variety of sizes. So we're gonna go back to that kind of gradation of scale. And I think The path I'm going to use is a very simple spiral, and I will start, I will just kind of lay out a very soft guideline of my spiral, and I left myself just a little less room here with my composition because I didn't measure, but I'm going to say let's make it a little bit of an ovular spiral so it fits a little bit nicer in this. Ovular is oval-like, so spherical is circular, ovular, oval-like. So I'm going to do more of an ovular guideline for a spiral. Great. And now we want to lay down several shapes in a variety of sizes to create a visual flow. I am going to start with the bigger objects on the outside going into a smaller scale on the inside, right? Which would create a sense of gradation and depth. I'm going to use the circle, square, and triangle again. And you need a little bit more control here because you are trying to create that gradation of size. So I'm going to start, I'm going to erase this a little bit just so I don't see those guidelines just as much. Here we go. And I'm going to start with circle in the center, a triangle, a square. I'm going to repeat that a couple of times in a really small scale. And now I'm going to start to scale up just a little bit because I want that gradation to be subtle. Now remember, we got to keep that ovular form. It's very easy to go right into that spiral. But we do want to keep our lines crisp for this exercise. And see how the circle forms here are just really tying in the flow of this form. And now I'm going to stop and look back. It's always helpful to kind of stop for a moment, look back, make sure that the direction you're going is the direction you want to go in. Are you missing any parts? Is anything out of place? Nope. And then you go back and to create that overall sense of not only continuation and flow, but kind of consistency in design and congruity of this design. See, that looks like a pretty clear spiral and continuation. So I think I'll stop there. So you'll notice that, I did kind of break my picture plane a little bit here. And that's okay because this is just a sketch. But having a really clear border is also very nice and encouraged. But for the sake of this sketch, I think it's okay. All right, so that's unity. We'll show you close up. We have unity by proximity, repetition, and continuation or flow. Very, very simple. I did not spend a lot of time on this. Again, I kept it very simple just to show you what I'm looking for in this exercise. I'm gonna pause here and then I'm gonna come back with emphasis. Okay, folks, I am back again, this time to show you some examples of what we can do for emphasis. So again, I'm starting out with my sketchbook. I'm starting out with my assignment sheet. So I make sure I'm following the direction, and I have the materials that I'm going to work with. So for the first one, we are creating no emphasis or focal point. So remember, this is an all-over design, an all-over pattern. It does not draw the viewer's attention to one specific point or another on the composition. When you think about no emphasis or focal point, some of the most famous paintings that we think of are Jackson Pollock paintings or Andy Warhol, Lee Krasner. She also had a lot of really good paintings that had a lack of emphasis. And so the way we're going to create this is very structured. It doesn't have to be structured, but for our assignment it is. And so I've already, as you've seen, drew out a border across my sketch pad, and I just did a 1-inch border, and so that has given me my drawing surface and my composition form. And then you'll also take a separate sheet of paper and create a mask with this. And so you're going to frame out a 1-inch square to a 3-inch square. I went with a 2-inch square, and I just measured halfway down the center of the paper and across, and then 2 inches on either side of that, and cut this out to create my frame. So what we're going to do is use this as a frame to move across the grid, and we are going to create an abstract design. You can use pencil or ink. The pencils I'm using are really lovely. You can get them, I'm sure you can get them online through Dick Blick. I don't know if they have them at Michael's. I know for sure they carry them at Blaine's, where you can get a student discount. But the pencils I'm using are called Palomino pencils. They come in a few different weights. Here are the 3. Softer graphites and harder graphites, and they're just beautiful. They're very soft, they're very smooth, they're wonderful if you're doing any type of blending work. They're just really great. They all have their own little erasers. I highly recommend Palomino pencils. Very, very great. And then I'm just using a regular old needlepoint gel-based pen. Not really a drawing pen, but I have been really loving that. So I've created my frame that's going to help me move across the bordered paper and create our all-over design, our all-over pattern. And I want this to be abstract, so you know, if you have been working in an abstract way and already have a kind of design that you like to create, you can do that. If not, just be loose and make gestural marks, make very free kind of loose designs and markings. And so I'm just going to go ahead and take my grid and mask up the section that I want to work in, and I'm just going to line the left top edge to the left top edge of my frame, and I'm going to just go right in with my ink. I might come back and use pencil to create a little bit more of texture, but I'm just going to go with ink. And because this is abstract, I'm just going to play around. I'm going to use more kind of curvilinear lines, right? There's 2 types of lines: curvilinear that are more fluid, soft, create a sense of that flow, and then there's more angular rectilinear lines that are kind of rectangular, that are harsher, that have strong angles. We'll talk a little bit about that when we get to line. All right, so I have my first, and then you're just going to move this frame along, and you're going to again line it up. I'm going to bring it to the edge of where my design ended, and I'm going to choose to be a little consistent with my line again, because we do not want to create a focal point. I'm going to bring it down. It looks like We have a little bit more room, so I'm going to use this as a guide and my border line as a guide. And I'm just going to continue that overall spiral, curvilinear line, creating a sense of flow. And I'm just going to move it along. And so I want you to move this along until you get to the final borders of your composition. So far, there is not one predominant area, right? I'm a little bit halfway through this composition, and there is pretty consistent use of line and flow, and there isn't one spot that's jumping out at the viewer. So I'm just going to keep moving. So there is the first no emphasis, no focal point, all over pattern, all over abstract design, utilizing a framed composition and a guide, a frame guide that we use to move around the composition. So there should not be any one area. If you want to double check your work, moving your frame around, there should not be any one area that is significantly different than the other. All right, so that is no emphasis or focal point. So we should just put a big X through this because it is no emphasis and no focal point. Okay, so for our next, we are doing emphasis by contrast. And this is done through collage. And so I want you to use either a magazine, a photo, or a book, or a couple of those things as your base image. And then you're gonna cut those out. You're gonna mount them into your sketchbook or onto white paper. And then you're gonna select one element of another image that contrasts in color, clarity, or text. You're gonna remove that element and place it into the full page image so that it creates contrast. And you're going for the maximum amount of contrast possible. So I was going around my house looking to see what I have. I don't really have a whole lot of magazines at the moment. And I wasn't, really wanting to rip up too many books. So magazines, books, newspapers, photographs. You can even download some images from Google search if you want to. And so I just picked through some kind of full page images. So I looked through these, and I think for my full page, I'm gonna go with the three children. So that's gonna be my base image. And then I looked at some other things. I have this, it's called a Macor. Thought it was kind of sheep. I found that image that I thought was good. I found this face mask image that we are all super familiar with. And so I think for emphasis by contrast, I'm going to focus on these two images. And so this is going to be my full page image, my base image, and then this is going to be the element that creates the contrast. This is even though this is in your sketchbook, I do want us to start thinking about craftsmanship. I want us to start thinking about clean lines and representation. And so you'll see there's a couple of things that we can change that make this look a little bit cleaner and crisper. So one is to cut this kind of scraggly line, right? And that would be the same with you if you're ripping something out of your sketchbook. Make sure you cut that frayed edge or the spirally edge. And then there's also this book number here at the edge that we can cut off. There is some text here. We can't really cut that off, so I'm not gonna worry about that. But the elements that we can control, it's a good practice, even though this is your sketchbook, it's a good practice to think about craftsmanship, think about the quality of your work, think about how you can always be pushing that quality. So you're gonna take your full page image and you are going to mount it into your sketchbook or onto paper, and you can use any type of glue, glue stick, you can use tape, double-sided tape, any type of adhesive that you have. And before you do that, always clean up your line. So I'm going to use this level. I couldn't find my ruler today, so I'm going to use this level on my table, get a nice clear edge, and I'm just going to measure the shortest distance of that fray so I can get a good clean line. There we go. So now I have clean edges. I've removed that visual distraction of that number. I've removed that visual distraction of that scraggly edge. And now I'm ready to work with my base image. This is the point where you would secure your image down. I'm not going to do that for this exercise, but this is where you will secure that. And so I've already identified this marker. I've just learned a new animal friend. I've identified this marker as being my contrasting element. I'm looking at it in terms of contrast by object itself, right? These are human forms. This is an animal form. That is a contrasting element. I'm looking at the tonality of this image. It's all in a very similar tone. Other than the black pants, there's a lot of, it's just blue and white. This has a green background, which I am going to cut out, but the tone is very natural, very muted, which is different than the image itself. The scale of this is different. So I'm going to cut it out, I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to double check to make sure it's contrasting enough. Because sometimes we don't know until we try it. And again, we want to make sure that this is a very intentional, very obvious contrasting element. This is what we want to draw the viewer's attention to. It is our, as the designer, as the artist, you are in this moment in control of what you want the viewer to focus on first, right? We always want to create designs that draw the viewer in, and sometimes you create designs that have the viewer look deeper into your work, and there's an element that draws them in, and then once they're in, they look deeper and they start to discover new things about your piece. And that's always a goal of lots of artists. I know with my work, you know, sometimes I have elements that stand out, that create a focal point or are more emphasized. But other times I leave little cute clues in my pieces that really make the viewer investigate. And then once they're close to your work, once they've investigated it, then they start looking around it more and start to notice things in your work that maybe they didn't notice before. So I'm taking some time, as you can see, cutting this out because again, I'm paying attention to craftsmanship, I'm paying attention to quality. I want to make sure my work is neat and clean, right? So there has to be a marriage between the representation, the quality, and the content, right? So that's the goal, is for quality and representation to match the content. And that's a goal that artists struggle with throughout their careers, whether they're emerging or whether they're mid-career or whether they're established, right? Is that balance of quality and craftsmanship and content. You know, the question often is it worse to have a well-executed project that doesn't have any meaning and that the content is lost, or a poorly executed project that has a great idea? I don't know if I can say which one is better, but I know which one is more sad to me. And that's a really great concept that's executed really poorly. So we always are trying to find that balance. All right, so I cut out our friend, I cut out our new friend, and now I'm going to see how I want to integrate it. Okay, well, I want him to replace the head of the boy, but I need to remove some of the elements so I can make the head look seamless. So I'm going to cut out the neck area. Okay, so now I have some guidelines and I'm going to cut this a little bit more accurately so I can integrate it better with the design. I want the quality to be good. I want the craftsmanship to be good. I want you all to think about how the finished pieces are going to look. And there we have it. Right, so this is my emphasis by contrast. So the contrasting element here is the macaw head that is replacing the young boy's head in the composition. And I'll hold that up for you. So that is emphasis by contrast. Okay, so our last exercise is emphasis by isolation. And this is a little bit of an easier one. And so this is to take a full page image again that you're going to mount in your sketchbook. And you're going to remove one element that exists in the image, and you're going to remove it, isolate it, and attach it or mount it alongside the original image, which creates a sense of tension between the isolated object and the original image that has the element removed. So I have two different examples I was going to use. I have another dancer here, a little bit of a jazz dancer, and then I have a face mask ad. So I think I will use, for this exercise, I think I'm going to use the dancer, if I was going to use this, I was just going to cut out the mask, remove it, and place it alongside. So if you can see where I was going with this composition. But for this, I'm going to use the dancer, and the element I'm going to remove and isolate is her foot. So again, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to look at this and see what is, as a composition, what is distracting to the viewer. Right now, we have some text and some numbers here, and we have that frayed edge here, right? If there's, I hope you take a lot from this class, but if there's one thing I can pound down, it is to remove those spirally edges. Remove the ripped edges. It is not good quality or good craftsmanship when that is left intact. Okay, so I'm going to remove that kind of rough border and that edge using my level ruler. Perfect. So those scraggly lines are gone. Those distracting numbers and text are gone. So now I just have my image, my full page image. And this is what you will secure to your paper. And you will isolate one of the elements. So the element that I'm going to isolate, again, is the foot. So I have a different set of scissors. I have sharper scissors here. This is where I would recommend an X-Acto blade, but if you do not have it, scissors are fine. So if you're using an X-Acto blade, always, always, always use a cutting board. Otherwise, you will destroy your surface underneath. So I want to keep that element intact because that's the element that I'm going to remove. So I am going to carefully carve around that element, keeping the shape intact. So I've got my foot element, and I'm going to go and take my scissors. I have some smaller scissors here, and I'm just going to clean that up. Being very, very careful. Go back to, okay. So now we're creating emphasis by isolation. I cut out the element that is going to be removed, which is the foot. You can see here it's been removed. And again, I went in with graphite and just darkened up some of those fibers that were pulled out when I was dragging the knife through. And I'm taking my full-size image and bringing it to the entire corner of my sketchbook. So there is a white space next to it that is empty, and then the other part is fully made up by the image. And then I'm taking the one element that we've cut out and isolated, and I'm simply going to adhere it to the paper next to the image that creates tension to the area where it was removed, right? So you want to put it directly related to the area where it was removed. So here you can see, folks, I removed the element. I set it on the paper directly across from that spot where it was removed, and that creates that visual tension and that sense of isolation, right? So the foot is isolated, but it's also evoking this kind of emotional isolation in the absence of the foot. Okay, folks, so the last exercise and emphasis we're going to do for the sketchbook assignment is emphasis by placement, and this will round out our sketchbook work, this topic for unity and emphasis or focal point. So we are going to focus on emphasis by placement, and this again is going to be utilizing the collage technique, and this can also incorporate more of a mixed media. So if you want to add some hand-drawn elements, or draw some things on the side and put them in and collage them in, you can. So you can use drawn elements, photographs, elements from books or text, images from magazines, or images that you print out of the internet. It's really up to you. So you can use a variety of sources for this exercise. I just used elements from a book. So that's how I chose to create this. And what you're going to do, I want you to use multiple elements. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements. You could use a lot more, but I don't really want you to use less than 4 or 5 different elements, because I really want you to get the idea of creating a collage with different elements that you combine together. And remember, we're trying to draw attention and draw emphasis or create a focal point using placement. So where we are specifically placing elements in the design, and how can the design use visual intention or an implied line or implied sense of focus to draw attention to what you want the viewer to look at. And we're focusing on one main element. So I am going to my base element is going to be the Colorado Bridge that is under construction. So I have this bridge, broken bridge component, and then the 4 other elements that I'm using are a cyclist, and I'm going to place him in the center, right? So automatically he is in the center of a composition. He is different than the other objects. It already starts to draw a focal point, draw emphasis there, but it's not super intentional, and we're really going for intentional focus, intentional placement. So the next little element is a miniature cyclist that I'm going to place kind of as though they are riding off of that bridge, attempting to jump over. And I'm going to place it there because it directly connects to the cyclist. So if your eye is drawn to that center point or is following that bridge line will take you across to the center and then straight down. So that bicyclist acts as almost a visual guide, and so does the center point that's bisecting the image. So then I have these different images of balloons, and red is always a attention drawer. It always creates a lot of focus. It's a very hard or very strong color, I should say. It's very, very saturated. And I'm going to put that circle directly under the wheel of that bicycle. And my eye definitely gets drawn there. And to break that up, because that red is quite harsh, and I don't want the red to just be the focal point, I want the bicyclist to be the focal point, I'm going to take these balloons that are a little bit softer in color, and I'm going to place them underneath the red so it breaks up that focus a little bit. It looks a little bit like these balloons are kind of splashing back up as this bicyclist is cycling through, I think this is the Hoover Dam area. So that is emphasis by placement. We have lots of visual indicators drawing our attention to the center image of the cyclist that's out of place. There shouldn't be a cyclist cycling through this dam area. And the colors also break up the kind of neutral, natural elements in this composition that further draw our attention to the cyclist in the center. And the miniature cyclist is just a little bit of an additional visual clue or cue to draw us into that cyclist in the very center. So those are the 7 exercises. We had unity by proximity, unity by repetition, and unity by continuation or flow. And then we had no emphasis or focal point, emphasis by contrast, emphasis by isolation, and finally emphasis by placement. Submit these sketches onto Blackboard and let me know, shoot me an email, let me know if you have any questions about the sketchbook exercises. All right, folks, I look forward to seeing what you come up with. And again, I'm here for you, so I will can schedule one-on-one check. We won't have a live class, but we can do one-on-one check-ins. So I hope that this little demo was helpful in moving through your sketchbook exercises, and I look forward to seeing you all soon.